1973.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Where were you living at the time?
I was in Meriden, Connecticut.
Why did you pick the service branch that you joined?
It was an invitation from the United States government.
So you didn't choose to join another branch instead of?
No, no.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Oh, sure.
Can you tell me what it felt like?
The first couple of days we were in processing, and what I mean by that is we got inducted into the service in New Haven, I think it was July 11th, and then we went down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and we spent 5 days going through different testings and getting uniforms and watching people with long hair look, bald. So it was kind of exciting. A little nervous, but it was exciting at the same time. And it was during that time that, during the testing, I was able to, I was offered quite a few positions within the service, flight school, military intelligence, and an opportunity to go to officers candidate school, and that's the one that I chose.
Officer candidate school?
Right.
Did you have to go to boot camp to go to officer candidate school, or is that something different?
It's in addition to. What happened was we spent our first, after we got processed, we went to the basic training school, which is 8 weeks in Fort Jackson. And because I was going to be an engineer officer, I got sent for advanced individual training out to Fort Leonard Wood, or quote, Lost in the Woods as everybody called it, for an additional 8 weeks of training. And after that point, I went to Virginia, to Fort Belvoir in Alexandria, Virginia, and we had a 23-week OCS class, which I participated in.
What was boot camp like?
That was pretty interesting. It was warm, it was summertime, and there were obviously people from all over the United States that were there. A lot of people from New York City with, quote, New York City attitudes. And a lot of Southern people. First time I had a major exposure to people from all over the country, especially the East Coast. And it was very good. It was demanding of us. A lot of regimentation, getting accustomed to getting up early, and living in an open community, which was all part of being in the service. It was actually pretty good. I met quite a few people there that I enjoyed their company. Not always their viewpoints on things, but it was a good time.
And from there, what was the AIT training like?
After we finished up at basic, we went out to Missouri, to Fort Leonard Wood, and it was more of a discipline of learning what engineer enlisted personnel, what they do, from making.
Is that just for engineer training?
Just for engineers. That's. I mean, there might be some other classes out there, but predominantly it's an engineering school. So I went out there and got familiar with all the things that would be required to do, making bridges, not horizontal, it was only horizontal work, using explosives, more training on weapons, and at the same time, obviously, Vietnam in the second half of 1968 was pretty active, to say the least. But it was good training, everyone was pretty confident, and there were two groups of people that were out there. One, the regular Army person that was on active duty, and at the same time there were a lot of reserve personnel out there. And that was interesting because there was always a little conflict, the ones that weren't going and the ones that were going. So that never escalated into any problems, but there was always jabbing going on.
Did you know at that point who was going over and who was not?
Well, we knew the people that weren't going.
Oh.
All the reserve gentlemen that were in doing their basic training and advanced training weren't going, and there was everybody else most likely was going. Let's put it that way. But it was done in pretty good taste. But life on the base was good. You could do anything very inexpensively. Most of us were E2s at the time. Not that we had a lot of money, but there was enough to take care of our needs and have a little fun off base. So it was good. It was good out there.
Why did you select the engineers? Did you have any prior background in engineering?
Not exactly, but there was the opening in Officers Candidate School for engineering officers, so you'd have to go to the basic training for, or the advanced training for engineers. That's kind of a step from basic to engineering AIT and over to the engineering OCS.
And how was the training at OCS?
That was great. It was, you know, I'm looking at it obviously from looking back from 30 some odd years ago. My wife and I often, you know, if we're watching, you know, quote, Officer and a Gentleman, some of the things that went on in that movie were all too accurate. Very, very good movie to watch and have some fun with. But it was pretty intense training. It developed the honor code in people where your word was your bond. If you said something, that's it. You could take it to the bank. And it was good discipline training, good leadership training, developed leadership skills that I use today. We saw a lot of people. We started with about, I think it was 120 in our class, and we graduated maybe 58 or 59 of them. There's a high dropout rate. Often people could get physically hurt that couldn't sustain the training. There were a lot of mental fatigue, let's call it, or people that just couldn't deal with it. I won't say we were under sleep deprivation, but they were trying to wash people out. And people did wash out. It was unfortunate. We had a couple of honor code violations, and those are kind of policed by the people at school, not necessarily by the cadre, in conjunction with them, let's call it. So it was good. I enjoyed it. We weren't too far away from Washington, D.C., so when we did have an opportunity to go out on some weekends, we did. And it was interesting. I won't say we didn't get in trouble from time to time, but it was very, very good.
Do you remember any of your instructors from any of the trainings?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think most people, most veterans anyways, would remember their drill sergeant from Sergeant Powell. He was an E6 staff sergeant. He was our drill instructor during basic training. I can see the AIT director, but I don't remember his name. Powell was the first guy we met, and I guess they have the regular production they put on, and it was one that I remember even today. We're all in the mess hall, all the new recruits, and they were, you know, serving us, you know, some nice drinks and some cake, and you know, everybody was kind of relaxing, let's call it, making, hey, this isn't going to be too bad. Everyone was kind of happy and carrying on like it was, you know, a Saturday afternoon at your house. And all of a sudden, he and the rest of the drill sergeants came in and started, let's say, using terms that we'd use in training to get men motivated. And, you know, they're screaming at us, throwing us out of this place, kind of setting the stage for the training, you know, get the mindset correct. I can see that as, you know, we're sitting here today. And that was to, you know, get you indoctrinated into the service. And
wasn't that scary?
It was a little unnerving, but it wasn't, I think most people dealt with it okay. You know, people were kind of taken back by it, but, you know, we were in the service, and it was, you know, a time of active, let's say, hostilities. They used to say at roll call, and I think it was the afternoon roll call, because mail was part of that. After they were to call you out to give you the mail, they'd always have Sergeant Powell would have a good remark about if you didn't get any, you better start writing, or something like that. So it was just to reinforce, you know, keeping communications with, you know, with your family or whoever you wanted to. And it was at that time, if people remember, I got my Dear John letter from my girlfriend at the time. I was out of the service, or out of her services, however you want to call it, but out of the area, and sure enough, I got my Dear John letter.
When you were in boot camp?
When I was in boot camp, yeah. So, hello, and you know, I don't love you anymore. But it was okay. You know, I mean, it turned out okay for me. But at the time, I'm sure I wouldn't be as casual about it as I am today. But it was good. There was one of the things that was interesting about boot camp. There was a kid from the South down there, and he didn't have a lot of, you know, formal education, let's call it, but he was a real good guy. And he was going to infantry AIT afterwards. And his life mission, he knew he was going to go to Vietnam as soon as his training was over, but he was going to be a mortar man. And he'd tell everybody that. And he was going to be the best mortar man in the United States Army. And I really admire him for it. You know, he might not want to have been president, but he wanted to be the best mortar man, and he was going to learn it. And just those little tidbits you remember from your basic training on it. I don't remember the gentleman in advanced training. I can see him. I just don't remember his name. And they were more sedate. They weren't people that were going to be in your face every day. That came next. But it was good. We had in Officers Candidate School, there was some very intense new officers that were in your face every day about disciplines, about meeting commitments, and seeing that you did them and that you wanted to do them. Gonzell was one of them, or Gonzalez, I believe. He was a first lieutenant. He was our attack officer, and he was in our face every day for discipline, and more discipline. And it was good. We had one issue that I ran into on a personal basis, which has a little comedy to it, but it wasn't funny at the time. There was a field inspection going on. This was in my 19th week. There was a field inspection going on of the company next door, and it was a very undisciplined company. So what they had the barracks outside. They took everything from inside the barracks. They had it set up in the company row, and there was a lieutenant colonel on actually doing the inspection. The company commander wasn't even doing the inspection. So they were running around all morning getting us ready, and we had a field pass that day. So a friend of mine and I went down to Washington, and we were drinking pretty heavy down there, and we came back to the barracks right when the middle of the inspection going on. So the field grade officer doing the inspection, and Kiskell and I come back, and we're pretty lit up. And we decided to walk through where they were having the inspection. It wasn't a good discipline. It wasn't good choices. So the colonel ran into us and just says, I'll be talking to your commanding officer about your condition. So, I mean, we probably didn't care at the time. So we ended up finishing up the weekend, and on Monday at the end of class is when our CO got a hold of us. And they lit a fire into us like I've never forgotten. And we're always, we were very concerned about whether we were going to be able to continue or not, whether, we were going to get dismissed from the class. And I can remember we were in a prone position for a long time, and they were talking about recycling us, turning us back, and all these other, adjectives that we knew about. So what happened was, then he changed that, and he says, what do you think about being restricted to the billeting area for the next 4 weeks? And we were both saying, that's good. That's a good thing, and we can definitely do it. So not out loud at the time. So what happened was they brought us into the orderly room, and they read us some more of the riot act and said that we'd be restricted to base until we graduated. And we were both like, oh, God, this is good stuff, because they could have thrown us out. We had to walk tours and things like that on the weekends, but we were restricted to the billeting area. So we ended up graduating on time. But when you look back, maybe not a good choice, but it's definitely a good story,
Yeah, right.
So we graduated on time. My wife came down once, maybe twice. I'm not sure if I remember correctly. We had a nice cotillion on base, and wives came down, and girlfriends, and it was my fiance at the time, or she's my wife now, but my fiance. So we got a little opportunity to spend some time together, but it was good. It was again, I'm looking at it back at it.
Right.
At the time, there were a lot of disciplines. We had one kid that was an all-star, athlete, a scholar. I forget the school he went to. We had a lot, from Boston College and some other academic backgrounds. And I had good memories. I beat him one day in a race, and he's contesting it, and I just said, "Hey, you're just slower than me." That's all. But it was a lot of fun. We had, it was very competitive, so it was a good experience.
What rank did you graduate OCS with?
I was commissioned as second lieutenant, and just like they had in the movie, we're with the first sergeant, not the drill officer, but the first sergeant, paying him his $1. It's kind of an interesting tradition. You always got to pay $1 to the first person you salute.
They really do that?
Oh yeah, that's real stuff. The movie was very real.
Really?
Yeah.
After OCS, did you ship right out for Vietnam?
No. What they did was, it's interesting, they're tricky little devils, those Army people. What they did was they brought us in maybe a week or two before graduation, and they said to us, where would you like to go? Because you're all going to go to Vietnam. So they said, we have another book, though, if you want to look at different assignments. And all you got to do is sign this piece of paper, and we'll look at different assignments for you. So a lot of the people signed up for what they call an indefinite status in the service. And I'm looking at things, and I said, hey, I'll sign up. And what happened was I went to school again after that. I went down to Fort Lee in southern Virginia, outside of Hopewell, Virginia. And I took a logistics course for, I think it was 8 or 10 weeks more to be in the supply side of business. And then when I graduated, I got married up in, back in Connecticut. And I shipped out, I think it was like 11 days after I got married, I shipped out to Germany for 3 years. And my wife was able to join.
So you were in Germany for 3 years then?
Yeah. Yeah, I went to Germany. My wife came over about 3 weeks after I got there. And then 10 months later, we had our first child. Very good assignment. It was good. And they were just rebuilding Europe at the time.
What was your job in Germany?
I had a couple different jobs. I was a supply officer, and I was a platoon leader. So it was very good. I took care of logistics that I got trained for, and also had leadership in when I made first lieutenant, I became a platoon leader. So things were good.
What were your duties as platoon leader?
We had a lot of different things we did. Most of it, the company that I was in, or battalion, 23rd Engineer Battalion, had did a number of different things. One, we had to protect the Fulda Gap, and back at the time, our mission was to save 48 hours in case the Russians came with trying to overrun Europe. So we had that as one of our strategic missions. The other ones included giving a lot of support to training of tanks. We would set up demolitions up at Fulda, or excuse me, at Grafenwehr or Hohensfeld, where we would help train the tankers. So that was good. We also did water purification. We had specific duties if there was, engagement in a war, and the rest of the time was in a training capacity, keeping everyone up to being battle ready, if needed. So that's kind of a nutshell of what we did over there.
And where did you go from there?
From there, I went to Vietnam.
How did you hear about your change in orders?
I just got my orders. I knew the assignment was good for 3 years, and then I knew I'd be reassigned.
Did you know you'd be reassigned to Vietnam?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it. And frankly, most of the people that, knew it was coming, not that you can be, quote, active and happy, but, most of the people had the tours, and you knew you were going to do yours. And at the time, I wasn't sure how much time I was going to spend in the service. So it's just part of being in. I mean, you're conditioned for it. It's not necessarily good or bad. You're just conditioned to go.
At that point, you shipped out to Vietnam. Did your wife go home to Connecticut?
Yeah, we came back from Europe, spent a little time in the States, and then I shipped out to Vietnam at that point, back in October.
Do you remember arriving in Vietnam?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you tell me what that was like?
Well, the trip over was interesting. We went out to Oakland, California first, and there was a staging area out there. We were there for about 4 or 5 days. Or I was there with a lot of people for 4 or 5 days. And then you take a flight from Oakland to Alaska to Japan to Saigon, Nhut Air Base. So that was, you know, you're anticipating all the way over, but not that, quote, misery loves company, but when you're all together, everybody's in the boat together. So it wasn't too bad, but you know, the anxious moments, of course. You know, anxious moments, of course. So then we arrived in country, and it was a couple-day processing. But you know, when you get in the country, it's so, God bless it, hot. And hey, as everybody knows, it smells when you first get over there too. You can just, you know, you're in country. And you know, I met a lot of people at the time. Everyone's, you know, I'm not saying quote everyone's your friend. That wouldn't be accurate. But everybody, there was a codependency on everybody. So, you know, people were helpful at almost every day to you. And then it's just, I had to wait for my assignment. I ended up spending about a month, maybe a little longer than that, before I was a company commander there. So I
Where
helped.
was that, at Nhut Air Base?
Yeah, MACV Special Troops. That was the company I was in charge of.
MACV?
Yeah, it stands for Military Assistance Command Vietnam, and you know, Special Troops. And what we did was we supported the MACV headquarters, and that's where kind of the in-country headquarters was for the war effort.
And where did you go from there?
That was my assignment.
So you were actually stationed at Nhut, even though it was an Air Force base?
Right. Yeah, we were. There was a lot of joint commands. I mean, I had predominantly Army people at the company level, but there were also Marines there, Air Force. There might have been a Coast Guard person or two, but it was a joint effort. It wasn't, you know, strictly the Army or strictly the Air Force, but it was in a support position. We had, like, there was 5,000 people on this in the area that were billeted there that weren't part of the company, but it was part of other people that supported the war effort.
What company were you in?
It was MACV Special Troops. That's what they call it. Yeah. In fact, I've got the guide on them. I'm having it. I brought it back. You know, everybody brings their souvenirs, but I have the company guide on. And in fact, I was talking about after I knew this was going on. I said to my wife that it's been stored since 1973. So I decided that this year, in fact, very soon, I'm going to get it framed and put on the glass and hang it up in a private area for me. And it's kind of a good feeling, you know. And let's see what else. You know, everybody took some souvenirs home. I brought back one of the Chinese rifles, which I still have. It's called whatever. It's not an AK-47, but it's an SKS-7, I believe. That's been sitting in my closet since I mean, it still has the same paperwork when I brought it back. It's attached to it. It's never been fired or anything. Just a little souvenir. Interesting time.
Did you see combat?
Not directly. What happened? We got rocketed a couple of times toward the end of the war. In fact, we got rocketed the last day of the war. But since where I lived was right on the base next to the airfield, that was always a target for you know, rockets from the enemy there, the Vietnam irregulars, Vietnamese irregulars, or from the regulars. So it's not a very, you know, no different than anybody else. So it's never comforting because they're not accurate. You don't know where the heck they're going to land, and we had some land pretty close to us. So, but as far as direct one-on-one, that was the extent of my combat, let's call it.
What was a typical day like for you while you were over there?
Well, you know, a lot of things happened. Usually it's, you know, you know, pretty early in the morning, get my first sergeant. His name was Sergeant Lumley. He's a great guy. He's an Air Force colonel, actually, Air Force sergeant. You get together.
They actually put Air Force guys underneath Army guys?
Right. Yeah. It wasn't, you know, quote, like underneath them. It was just the way the company was made up because it was from all the services. They happened to have an Army guy running it. From an officer position, but from a non-commissioned officer position, they had an Air Force first sergeant. And he's great. You know, he's very well, you know, very experienced. There I am. I guess I was 26 or 27. You know, he was probably closer to 40. So, it's good balance between, youth and enthusiasm and balance with, age and maturity, let's call it. Not that we both weren't either or the other, but it was a good match for us. And a lot of it, the details that were done during the day, supporting motor pools or command trailers or whatever it was that each department was doing, we just ensured it got done. And you take care of the running of the company from payroll or processing of people. We had a fair amount. I won't say a lot, but we had our own drug problems with people. I ended up discharging 3 people in the company that were caught with repeated drug violations. Some that were pretty hard to deal with, to be honest with you. But hey, you got to make the call, and especially.
And then what happens to them?
They received general discharges. They're shipped out. You're just not. They were not reliable people at the time. They could be, maybe in a different situation, reliable. But, for pulling guard duty or doing things like that, you just can't rely on those. So we, you have to make the decisions. You make them and, move on. You really can't look back. But they weren't given dishonorable discharges, just general discharges that I'm told could have been elevated back to honorable discharges. You just couldn't have those people at that time in their lives be there. And you learn every excuse possible. There was other things that we participated in. I was in a court-martial when I was there, which was, just part of the process. There was a person that refused an Article 15, demanded a court-martial.
What's an Article 15?
That's just administrative punishment. Administrative punishment, maybe for, doing something, breaking a rule, let's call it. That wouldn't be a bad rule. Let's just say a rule, not a major one. But if someone, they don't have to take the administrative punishment, they can ask for a court-martial, and this particular person did, and we ended up finding him guilty, but gave him all the opportunity to kind of gain everything back, reduction in grade. Let's see what else, pay forfeiture, and there was, I think, a restriction put on it. But we said if you meet all the requirements here, we're going to give it all back to you. Just, take care of yourself. So things like that. There's just the day in and day out running of the company. So that's kind of like there was a lot of things going on. Obviously, not obviously, during the December of 1972, that's when the bombing really, the bombing of North Vietnam up in Hanoi went on. There was only like 50 or 60,000 troops left in the country at the time, American troops. So there was a lot of.
What was the date when you went in country?
It's either the end of October or 1st of November.
Of what year?
1972, yeah. So there's a lot of activity going on. My orderly room was on the Tet Offensive when they came into it, so we made sure we had the right, let's say, night guards, so it wouldn't happen again, at least in our area. And it was good. I look back differently maybe than some other people. And we had a lot of opportunities at night. I lived in the city for a while before I moved on base. We lived in a converted French hotel.
In Saigon?
Yeah, in Saigon. So some of the surrealistic.
Do you remember the name of
the Massachusetts. Oh yeah, you remember. And it was.
Nice French name.
Oh yeah. Well, we might have renamed it. It was just for military, predominantly officers to live in, and it wasn't. It was part of the unreal experiences. We had great, not great, but decent living quarters. And then, like on the top floor, there was an officers' club. We had a band every night. For those that wanted to participate, there were plenty of girls to dance with, if you get my drift on that. And we used to go up on the roof at night, maybe have a few beers in us. We'd sit there with some folding chairs, and the base was illuminated, the airstrip was illuminated at night. We'd sit there and watch the war for a while. Not that there was, quote, anything going on, but you could hear maybe some activity in the background, and just, that was relaxation time for us. But some of it didn't make any sense. You're in a war zone, and you could be up partying all you want. So I guess that was good. You know, I look back at it and I say that I don't think a lot. It wasn't that people drank a lot. You know, go out and have a few beers and just kind of relax. There were other things going on too. That some of the guys were going to go a little further than that, but you still always have to be vigilant. You have to be ready for you know, for the call. And then I moved on to base when I took over the company, and I lived with some very interesting characters. I was a junior officer in the house, a couple colonels, and a couple majors, and one other captain. And that was an unbelievable experience. One was Colonel Gene Bond, just a Southern gentleman, and Colonel Pennick. And now Colonel Pennick was a character. Colonel Pennick was the logistics officer for Vietnam. Everything was under his control. And he made a statement. He says, "Gentlemen, we will not be miserable." So he made sure that after, you know, the troops were taken care of, that, you know, if we needed a fresh turkey or fresh ham on Christmas, and bone china, sterling flatware, crystal, and
Where did he get this stuff?
you know, I as a junior officer,
You didn't ask?
I had a few responses. One was usually, "Yes, sir," or "When would you like that?" But no, there was nothing hanky-panky going on. He might have had it shipped over or whatever it was, but he just, he would love, he was a bourbon guy at night. He'd drink a few and make cornbread, or he had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And, you know, if he had a couple extra drinks, he'd start singing to himself and record it, and then they'd play it back to him. But we never held that against him. But that's some of the experiences that we look back, and it was fun. I'm not sure if I was supposed to have that type of experience, but he said, "Gentlemen, we will not be miserable." And we never were. And we would have, there was a lot of American women there, and our house was it wasn't a Blair house or anything, but it was a nice house on base. It was private. And, you know, if people wanted to come over, it was always available, open, just to be able to talk to people. We had a beautiful, you know, living room, and all outfitted, television. We had everything. So we lived well. I'll definitely say not at anybody's expense, but it was good. Except when we got hit, you know, because I don't think we were a target ourselves, but I learned how to dive down a whole flight of stairs with one leap, you know, because you had to get outside.
Did you explore Saigon at all in
Oh,
your
yeah.
time off?
Sure.
What was Saigon like?
Saigon's it's an interesting city. There were a couple, you know, go out for restaurants, you know, to go out to eat. I traveled a little bit with two attorneys that were over there, and we'd go out to eat, but that was okay, or go to a theater, that was okay. A little bizarre, but it was okay. But some of the best memories were, we'd go down to the Continental Hotel. This dates back to maybe the, I don't know, 1930s or before. I know there's a couple of movies, I can't remember who was in them, but it was in some movies. And we would go down there and sit out on the veranda and get some 33 beer, put our feet up and watch the war go by, and you know, like from civilian viewpoint. And that would be on a Sunday, and it's a little bizarre, but we did it. You know, we would go down there and have a few beers and put our feet up on the railing and just watch. You know, watch the people. And in front of there, in front of the hotel, there was a big boulevard, and there's a huge statue that was there, and it was a picture or a statue of a South Vietnamese soldier, large, I don't know, maybe like, 20 feet tall, and behind him was an American soldier. And it was, a lot of people had their own interpretation of why it was this way or why it was that way. But yeah, we saw it a lot. And it is a beautiful country. The conditions, obviously, at the time weren't good. You know, drive by the palace, where the president was. But, you know, everybody had their own escape. Everybody had to kind of shut down for a while. And those are some of the things that we did. It was interesting.
Did you visit any other places in Vietnam
I
outside
had
of Saigon, or did you stick pretty close to Saigon?
I had to go out a couple times to a Korean a rook operation, you know, take a ride out through the bush, and yeah, it was some exciting things that happened on those times. I lost my convoy escorts one time, so I had my driver myself carrying quite a bit of money that I was delivering, but it was okay. A little spooky going through some of the villages, but not necessarily bad. Just it was interesting, but that was about it. You know, just a couple times out into the field. But at the time when I got into country, Colonel Hall, which is a colonel that I knew in Europe, he had asked me if I wanted to take an assignment with him up on the DMZ in I Corps, or First Corps, and I was weighing that out when I got selected to take over the company, which, you know, turned out okay for me. But had I not gotten that, I might have gone up to the DMZ. But, you know, who knows what would happen.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I got one citation, a Bronze Star for service, when I was over there during the 5 months that I was there.
You were there for 5 months?
Yeah. What happened was, I was there the last day. When the war ended, the peace accord was signed.
Did you guys see it coming?
We were hoping. I don't know if you say see it coming. You know, we're on the bottom of the totem pole. But we knew there was only 50 or 60,000 Americans left inside country at that time. And we knew that Hanoi was getting bombed almost every night. And not that we didn't know where the negotiations were going on. I forget what Stars and Stripes used to say about it, but we knew things were happening, but not in great detail. And then they made the announcement in January. Best recollection, I think it was January 28th at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, the peace would go into, or the withdrawal of the Americans, the peace went in, because we got hit that morning with more rockets. I remember at 6:30 in the morning we got hit.
You got hit at 6:30. When did you hear the news that they were going to withdraw?
No, we already knew it, but the peace didn't start at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, they have a beginning date and ending date. So at 6:30 we got hit, which is still, we were, I guess, fair game for another hour and a half. But it was kind of interesting how that happened. And I got to see Bob Hope. Bob Hope came over too.
You did get to see him?
Yeah, I've seen him twice. He was...
Both times in Vietnam?
No, I saw him in Europe once, and I saw him in Vietnam. And he and his wife were there. It's, you know, she sings White Christmas, and it was pretty good. One of the guy that I replaced, Lieutenant Reed, he had an assignment. This is, you know, one of the things of, he had an assignment to go with Major Acello to guard the 12 women that comes with him. And for those that have seen Bob Hope's Women's, suffice to say, let's say they take the girls off the front of the magazine, not the back of the magazine. So I got to talk to him. He had a great time. He went up all over country, went to Bangkok with them to provide, you know, escort service. You know, things happen. But that was seeing Bob Hope is kind of it's a reward to do something by itself. So I was very.
How were you lucky enough to get? Well, you're in the right place at the right time.
Right place, right time.
Because you were an officer.
No. I was right place, right time. Now, Lieutenant Reed, that's another issue. But for myself, I saw him in Germany in one of the air bases. I can't remember the name of it right now. I think it was Fliegerhurst. And I saw him right on Tan Son Nhut.
He came to Tan Son Nhut?
Yeah, he was in Tan Son Nhut, yeah, for Christmas of 1972. Yeah, I just happened to, you know, right place, right time. It just, his shows, or any of the people that do the shows today, it's incredible. The elevation of the morale, the contact with America, the contact with your family that he brings, and others too. But all of a sudden, it's you know, a slice of pie. It's so good, and it sustains people. And even if you didn't go to it, knowing that he was there seemed to have the same effect. You might say, I didn't get to see him. But everybody is uplifted. Everybody is, re-energized and fortified when people, not only the status of Bob Hope, but when people care enough. It's good to see the support from, when Bob Hope and people like him were around, just energized everybody, and even if you weren't there, you knew you had the support back home, and it's a great thing.
A little bit about Barrick's life and communications with back home. How did you stay in touch with your family back home?
During the time when I was overseas, they had you could call into a two-way radio. So what would happen was, I forget where I'd go. I don't know if I did it at the company headquarters or somewhere else, but you go to a location, and the base in Nhut would get in contact with a ham radio, usually in North Carolina. And at North Carolina, they'd make the call to, my wife was home with her parents at the time, and our daughter.
In Connecticut?
In Connecticut. So they'd get the phone call in, and you'd say, hello, honey, over. So everybody would click, 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 and then she could hear that, and then she'd say, how you doing? What do I say now, over? So
But you can actually hear each other's
oh yeah,
voice?
yeah, you could hear each other's voice on it. So we, that was one of the ways we communicated, by phone, which is excellent. It was a little hokey, but here.
How often was that? Like
Oh,
once a week, once a
yeah,
month?
at least once a week. Yeah, at least once a week. And I'd write home, a couple times a week. She wrote to me every day. And
Did you save letters?
I don't think so. If they are, I don't know where they are. There could be. I don't think my wife saved them. Her mother saved every letter from her father when he was in World War II. I know that. But I don't know if they're still around, but there was a stash of letters, let's call it. So we wrote back and forth. We talked on the phone. And I got a lot of letters from my mother-in-law and from my mother. So there was a lot of good communications going back and forth. Every time you get mail, it's the support from back home. So it was very good.
What was the food like?
Well, it varied. We had a consolidated mess, and that was very good. It was good quality food. There was an officers club that was good. There was a Vietnamese officers club on base that was good. But the best one, there was also a general's mess on campus or on base, and we had a lot of parties over there. And yeah, that was the best. So, but no, not at the expense of anyone else.
As an officer, did the officers associate with the men and all?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's good working conditions all the time. The officers could go to the NCO club. Although, I guess there's a little distinction between, getting along. I mean, there was never really a problem on that. I saw anyways. And, I mean, you wouldn't go out, out carousing, because that's just not the right thing to do. Well, it might not be the right thing to do with anyone else, but you wouldn't want to, you didn't do that. But I didn't see any distinctiveness between the ranks like that, other than how it's set up to be.
Were there any supplies that you were lacking for?
No. We had everything we needed.
Was there anything special you did for good luck?
Tried to go to church once a week. I think.
Was there a church on base?
Oh yeah, there is a church on base on it, and I'd go to mass, and I went to other services. Just take a moment, reflect, kind of make sure you got all the help possible. let's face it, we all knew that we might get killed. Not that you worry about that so much, but you want to, try to get your house in order and then not worry about it.
How did people entertain themselves? Well, you mentioned going to the theater, going to the movies.
There's a fair amount of card playing. There was always a pretty good, maybe, high stakes card game going on at the club. So if people wanted to do that, they could. Stars and Stripes are pretty important. Yeah, that's a real important paper to get, get your updates.
Did you save any copies?
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, life's going to go on forever. You don't think about, saving them.
Did you have any leaves while you were over in Vietnam?
Unfortunately not. There's usually after 6 or 7 months you can take either an in-country or out-of-country R&R. Vung Tau was where a lot of people went. That was an in-country R&R up on the coast. Fortunately, the war ended. My wife and I had planned to go to Hawaii, for a mid-tour. Unfortunately, that never happened. So I didn't take an R&R.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events while you were over there? Did you guys play jokes on each other at all?
Not too much. There's a lot of good activities going on, as I mentioned earlier, like down at the Massachusetts, and none that I can think of right off on the top of my head, as far as jokes on each other.
Did you take any photographs?
There's a couple. I have I don't know where they are. There's a couple photographs, and I have a couple photographs of when I took over the country. They had a professional, or took over the company. They had a professional photographer when when I got the awards, rather. I've got a couple photographs. Wilfred Smith was a general over there that presented the awards, and someplace in my house, they're still there.
What did you think of other officers and fellow soldiers? Were you close friends with anybody over there?
Reasonably close, but a different type of closeness, kind of like a codependency. I'd mentioned a couple of the people earlier. There was another captain that I lived with. We would go out together sometimes. A couple of lawyers that we went out together with. From a closeness, I was pretty close with Sergeant Lumley. He was my first sergeant. I depended on him a lot. I was pretty open on all issues with him. I used him as a sounding board. We had a couple issues where, a couple stories. Just before it was all over, when we came home, there was a couple of sweeps through Saigon to look for people that are absent without leave. And a couple things happened at that time. There'd be nothing worse for the first sergeant to have any of his NCOs get caught in something like this. And about a dozen did, along with one major. So we had them all in, and they had been caught, written up on a police report, and they did some major violations. No, well, they did some violations of the code. So I got my first sergeant, and we figured we'd probably fine them all, for being, quote, stupid. But, I got to take action. I got the reports in. And so I took care of Article 15s for all of them that I could administer to. And then, at the same time, there was a major that got caught. And at one of the general staff meetings I'd go to once a week, I'd say, I asked my direct boss, Colonel Williams, and I'd say, what are we doing with these guys?
Is a colonel higher than a major?
Oh, yeah. He's a full colonel, 06. So anyways, he said, well, we're just going to take care of them. So I said, oh, okay, no problem. So you're going to take care of them. All right. So I went back to my orderly room and I said, hey, Top, we're going to lose all these. We're going to lose every one of these articles. We're not going to cut any orders, just get rid of them. Because if they're not going to take care of the major, I'm not going to take care of these guys either. So I said, why don't we just lose this stuff and I'll let you take care of that. See you later. So I didn't, you got to have equal justice. So I felt pretty good about that. Now we did have some other issues for things when after the peace accord was signed, we had to prepare the billets, or where the people were going to stay, from the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. They're the enemy. So we're preparing these buildings for them to sleep and to live in, let's call it.
You mean that they're going to live in after the Americans are gone?
Before the Americans are gone. We have to get ready for it. We've got to, do the build-outs, whatever it might be. So I had a little morale problem. So, we went out, company formation, these are the instructions we have. And, let's say everybody wasn't too cooperative. So during the day I find out people aren't showing up for work details, and, we're not getting the job done. I got people asking me, where's the job? We got to get this ready. We got, the world watching, or forget the world watching. We got to get a job done. So the next day, I went out for a morning formation, and everyone that didn't do what they were supposed to do, I had Article 15s prepared for them. And the first day we fined the company, I think it was $5,000. It was a lot of money. And I got up there, and I'm not one to get up on a podium. I said, gentlemen, this is our job. This isn't like, come or go. So we're going to get it done. We're just going to get it done. And I understand how you might feel. We're going to get it done. So the next day, I think it was down to $3,000 in fines for people that had a difference of opinion with me. And I think the third day it was a couple hundred. And then we're okay. And I told them, I said, guys, we're going to get this done. That's all I can say. But I understood. But I had no, I won't say everybody has choices. Everyone's back on the fourth day, no problems. But, you just can't have any, any sign of a rebellion. So we got it done. There was no problems after that. No problems.
And then how long did you actually stay in country after that, before you all shipped out? Were you still on base with the North Vietnam?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was there.
That when the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong actually came on base with the Americans.
It was a little tense. Yeah, it was a little tense. Now, you have to remember, too, as tense as it was, everybody was going home. So even though it was a lot of, feelings, we got to make beds for these people that were shooting at us yesterday. And so that, like I said earlier.
There was probably some excitement about going home.
Yeah, but at the same time, even though we had to do all that, people knew they were going home. So that's a good thing. What we did was a good thing. It just wasn't a popular.
Right.
It wasn't their first choice.
Were there any incidents between the Americans and the...
At least none that I can remember right now, or none that I was exposed to. But one of the things that did happen that was kind of interesting, the last day, I left on the last plane. So when...
there were no more Americans left over there?
Oh yeah, there were Americans, but they were the Joint Military Command, to JMC. Yeah. Hey, maybe uniforms, but they all looked in civilian clothes. So we were out of there. So when we were leaving, there were two 747s on the runway. And
Again, out of Tansanut?
out of Tansanut.
And you left out of there.
Yep. So we're getting ready to fly out, and so we're getting the everybody's got their vehicles, brought their clothes, everything to go back. And outside of the line to go down to the plane, there were the most arrogant Vietnamese, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. They're counting us. And we're going home. It's, you guys are going to deal with this, but I'll never forget that. They were like checking us off. Not that they necessarily had our names, but they were making their own statement, let's call it. And when we left, a lot of the soldiers had married Vietnamese women and had children. And so the plane was full of families.
Oh, they could bring their wives and children with them to America?
Yep. Yeah, it was unique, let's just call it that way. I mean, because they were leaving, and off we go. I shouldn't say a lot. There are quite a few of them now. And then we left.
Do you remember the date it was you flew out?
I believe it was March 29th. 1973. I could be one day off, but I believe that was the day.
And then when you came home, where did you go?
We had a great flight home. We went up to Japan, and then we flew back to Seattle. And then we maybe had like 10 stops. We hopped all along the country. And it was a long flight. But people were getting off in different cities and, you know, changing planes. It wasn't the same plane all the way home. And I flew into Bradley, the old Bradley, not the new Bradley. And my wife knew I was coming in, and I had a very exhausting last leg of it. Without getting into too much details, I had kind of, I'd say a little not meltdown, I just, you know, the emotions of coming home. So I can remember still, there was an old long runway at Bradley before the new airport was done. And I can remember I'm running through crowds and, you know, not slow motion, but I was just running all the way. I could see her at the end of it. And I'm just running through, pulling an O.J. Simpson almost at the airport. And it was wonderful. It's coming home, you know. And we had a 3-year-old daughter who was home. She didn't come up to the airport at the time. It was just Angela and I. So it was pretty exciting just to get home. And then we went to Missouri from I came home, but I was reassigned to Missouri again. Same place where I'd gone and done my advanced individual training. And it was in April of 1973 when we got out there. And there were a lot of reductions in forces going on. In other words, they're going to reduce number of active soldiers. And my name came up, and they said, we don't need you anymore. So that came up at the end of May or early June, I forget which. Maybe it was May of 1974. And I got out July 17th or 18th of 1973. If I said 4, I made a mistake, yeah.
So it was 73.
Yeah, so it was 5 years in.
What did you do in the days and the weeks after you got out?
Well, it was interesting. When I got out in July, the first thing we did, we're in Missouri. We drove out to see my parents in New Mexico for a couple of days. And then we drove back. And had a great trip back. We stopped in Washington for a night, Washington, D.C., to see one of my friends from Europe who was based down at Fort Belvoir. And then we had kind of a nice, you know, we got back to Connecticut. And my parents had turned over a summer house to us for use in the summer in Madison. So I was kind of looking at 90 days. I'm going to come home. I had some separation pay that I was given. So I said, we're going to just take it easy. And what we did was we did some partying for a while. And then I decided that I've got to, you know, get into work. And I started to do my job research. And I ended up getting my first job at one of the Stop and Shop companies, Medimart Drugstore, and a management training program. And I did that for 1 year. And then I got into my current business of office equipment sales.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service that you stayed in touch with afterwards?
Oh, yeah. Most of the friends, when we were in Germany, there was a new band, let's call it, of second lieutenants that arrived at the base. So that group is still close today. Yeah, but we keep it.
Do you write to any of them?
Most of it's, you know, phone or email.
Yeah, with email, I bet.
Right. It's a lot easier. In fact, within the last year, I located my initial sponsor. He's in Hawaii, Cal Delaplane. We've talked to him quite a bit. There's a lot of John Kaufman. He's another one of the lieutenants. He's here in Connecticut. Jim Eisert's down in Washington. He was another one. We're all in the same company together. Hey, we're all grandparents almost. Those at Kaufman and Eisert are close. We've seen each other over the years. They're just, you know, it's always great to get together. There's another one, the one that I stopped to see in Washington on my way back, were godparents to his daughter. He's down in Florida. You know, a couple of changes in their family status. They know, divorced and remarried. When my wife had our child 33 years ago, his wife, Nancy, was like a sister to my wife. We're still in contact with her. A lot of these people have taken, let's say, their life, they've gone all over the place and some highs and lows in their life. One of the funniest guys, Al Annis, we lost him. We don't know what happened to him. We saw him about 9 years ago in Florida with his daughter. We can't locate him anywhere. We can't find, he's divorced. We can't find his wife anywhere. We'd like to get a hold of him. He's a great guy, one of the Georgia Tech grads, but unfortunately, we've lost him, I think. I think he might be dead. But the rest of them, we keep in contact with. There was another.
Do you have reunions?
We talked about putting one together for Europe. Not necessarily in Europe, but not from my Vietnam experience, but some of the European ones. I think that might happen within the next 2 or 3 years. It'd be like a 35-year anniversary for it. And the people there it's pretty close for a couple of reasons. One, most of us were all married within the year we were there, either before or when we were there. We all started having kids. And it was a very close community. The 23rd Engineer Battalion, which has been retired, but the people at the battalion, I mean, we did a lot of partying together. We went through some scary issues together for, you know, growing up, let's call it. There was a commander's call every Friday at the club. Sometimes we stayed later than we should, but we had great times there. I mean, it's just incredible. We got to travel throughout Europe. I just came back from Paris a couple of months ago, and my wife had gone twice when we were over there, so it was very good to be back again. We got over to see the Pope, went to Rome, went up to the British Isles, went to Spain. So we did a lot of traveling when we were over there. So we have some great memories over there.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Not actively, no. What happened, I should clarify that. When I got back, they tried to get me into the Guard, and when I got out of the service, because of the reduction in force, you know, they were lining people up, you're out, not literally, but, you know, the letters going out. And when I came home, you know, I just got back from Vietnam, like I said, in March. I got notified in May. So when people did call me, I kind of made a conscious effort to say, hey, I put my duty in, I'm done. You know? So I didn't join the reserves, or, you know, I never got active in any of the organizations.
And what's your present career?
As I mentioned, I started in 1974 in office equipment sales, and I've been in it for 30 years.
And that's what you're doing now, working for ICON.
Yes.
Did you have any other children after that first daughter?
Yes. I have a 27-year-old son who happens to work for the company, lives up in Boston. He's a great young man.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Absolutely. It's like one of the things that you want, I think, as a military person, veteran, is the support to the government, or support by the government, to get the job done. And it'd be nice to have, you know, always a popular thing to do. But if you're assigned a detail, wherever you're sent or whatever you're doing, just have the resources to get it done, as opposed to you know, sending people out and good luck. You know, just make sure that you have the resources to get it done, and to obviously we're going to engage the you know, quote, engage the enemy. We've got to go in there with the single purpose of winning. That's all. Just a single person. Let's win. Let's get our job done. Let's come home. No different than any other job. You know, you can't go in there with, let's say, you can't go in there half-baked. You can't go in there without a commander-in-chief that really is behind you. That's why, you know, no political statement, but who's ever the president, it's got to be the commander-in-chief. And we need a person of strong conviction, of moral character. We need someone to get the job done, whatever side of the aisle they may come from. You know, I'm not talking about political affiliation, but we do need a strong person. And just as a side comment, you know, sometimes I look at some of the people that might be running for office, and we're in the middle of primary, and I said, can that person make a decision, whether it's popular or not? You know, can they make a decision that's going to support the troops? And you know, hopefully we always have a person in there, male, female, whatever persuasion, that knows that if he puts the troops in harm's way, that they're going to support it 100%.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
I think really positive. A lot of the processes that I learned in the service I try to use today, from, you know, in a business way. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and get into the middle of the project. I mentioned earlier, you know, your word's pretty important. If you say you're going to do it, do it. A lot of that's, you know, goes back to military training. You know, don't be afraid. I was in negotiations today with a big contract. You can't be afraid. You know, not going to shoot you today. So I have a good attitude, I think, from it. You know, I try to use, you know, the training. It's excellent training on it. And it's training, I think I try to have, you know, some discipline of my children. I've heard feedback over the last few years that I scared the ever-living hell out of them. Not necessarily trying to or thinking that I was, but I've been told that my kids were a little afraid, which I'm not going to say is a bad thing. You know, they would know if they were in trouble, they would have both names. It would be Stacy Lynn or Brian Patrick. They knew they better post up in a hurry. So I would occasionally use some crazy words like, you know, police up your area, some old military terms. But I don't think it hurt them at all. Hopefully not.
What would you say if your son or your daughter told you they wanted to join the military today?
I'd encourage it. I never really put my daughter in that vein or thinking she'd go into service. She's a teacher. But I often thought my son might want to. You know, we talked a little bit about maybe an appointment to West Point, if that's something he wanted to do, which I would encourage him, but I wouldn't make it a condition of something going forward. If he'd like to do it, I think it's good. It gives a man an opportunity, a man or a woman an opportunity to see the world, get to know a lot of people, get to experience some very, very good things in life. No one wants to, you know, put their family in harm's way or, you know, encourage them to go fight. If it happen to come up, that's part of the roll of the dice. But there's a lot of good disciplines, as I mentioned earlier. Travel is good, and different professional skills that not only in the leadership skills, but other skills that someone could use on more of a technical basis. So I'd have no problem with it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we've not covered in this interview?
I'm glad I'm here. It's been very enjoyable. I'm glad that we have our monument for the Vietnam memorials. I've been down there quite a bit. It's a cleansing to go down there, cleanse your body for the day anyways. It's an area that brings back good memories and bad memories, but memories. It's interesting, you can run into another person your age and you just give them a hug. I mean, you know, I'm not a tree hugger, but you know, you go down there and it's like you immediately connect with people. Every barrier that may be brought up for whatever reason doesn't exist. There's no age or color or economic or social background that exists when you're down there, and you can just you feel good. You feel good. I like to look up a couple of names for, you know, put your hand on it for a minute. I'm glad WW2 is the memorial is going up right now. It's going to be completed in another couple of months and dedicated in May, I believe it is. It's very impressive so far. I'm glad what they've done for the Koreans and Korean war veterans, the nurses. So Washington's a great place to go to, register for your Piece of America that day. So I like that. But that's, I've covered most of the things, and I'll probably remember more later, but it's good to share this.
Thank you so much, Pat. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.